Hello, and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Meller. How are you doing today? I'm thrilled to have you here with me. Now, before I introduce you to today's guest, I'd like to ask you if you'd be willing to do me a huge favor. I know, a weird way to start the podcast. Well, it's huge to me, but it only takes a couple of minutes for you, I promise. If you're enjoying the podcast, I would be eternally grateful if you would please take a moment to rate the podcast and leave a short review of what you like about it or any aha moments that you've experienced. It doesn't have to be long, but it is so helpful for me to hear about what's resonating with you and what you'd like me to create more of. And because of the algorithms, it's also really helpful for other Mystic Dog Mamas and Papas to find this beautiful, supportive community that we're creating here together. If you'd be willing to take just a couple of minutes to do that, it would mean the absolute world to me. So truly, thank you so much for doing that. Okay, so today we're going to be talking all things predation. Now, what is that, you might ask? Well, predation is a natural sequence of behaviors that your dog loves to do, and some of it you might not be so thrilled about. It includes things like sniffing and stalking, as well as behaviors like chasing and eating things they find on the walk. In fact, most of your dog's favorite hobbies are actually linked to predatory behavior. I mean, did you see that reel I shared on Instagram of Lucky hunting for socks? Straight out of a wildlife documentary film. My guest today is Simone Mueller. She's a certified dog trainer and dog behavior consultant from Germany who specializes in force-free anti-predation training. And she joins me to share some really easy ways that you can turn your dog's natural predilections for predation into training gold. Her training, workshops, and books all focus on Predation Substitute Training, which involves creating fun activities that serve as safe alternatives for your dog to express their need and desires to engage in predation. So if your dog is reactive or tends to chase things like squirrels while you're screaming at her to come back, or scavenges everything he finds on the ground, you'll learn some helpful tips and tricks that you can apply today. From creating games that match your dog's passions to talking to your dog as a practice, Simona answers listener questions and she shares some really practical ways that you can help your dog be more dog in a safe and fun way. Just a quick note before we dive in is that this episode was sponsored by Aspirationary, which, in full transparency, is another project of mine where we create books, notebooks, and stationery to help you become all you aspire to be. You can check out our shadow work and moon magic journals and workbooks, as well as our popular My First Period Tracker for young girls and tweens on Instagram at Aspirationary. That's spelled Aspirationery. Okay, on that note, let's go. Hi, Simona. I am so thrilled to welcome you on the Mystic Dog Mama podcast today. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Alexia, for the invitation. It's very great to be here today.
This is going to be a great conversation because so many of my listeners have gotten in touch talking about the general problems that they have with their dogs. And I'm saying problems in kind of air quotes because I think we're going to debunk some of that framing around our dogs today. But one of the big things that they talk about is reactivity. And this is a conversation that's coming up over and over and over again. And I'm loving to take some different perspectives on what reactivity actually is, what it's telling us about our needs that our dogs are expressing, and different ways that we can go about it. And your work is just so beautiful because I feel like it really honors who the dog is, and at the same time is giving owners like really practical things that they can be doing that help them from their perspective of coping with these needs that their dogs have and giving the dogs appropriate outlets to be a dog.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really great. So I wondered if you could maybe start off, for those who aren't familiar with your work, could you talk a little bit about what predation substitute training is and how you came about this path?
Yeah, that's yeah, quite a story. As a lot of dog professionals, I came to dog training through my own dog, especially through my first dog that I had when I was a young, inexperienced dog owner. I had my first dog when I was, I think, 20, 21. Her name was Malinka. She was a mix between Australian Shepherd and something mysteriously else. We don't really know. We think it was something like a Rottweiler or maybe I don't know, a Steffi or something like this, a little bit more heavy. So she was really sturdy. And yeah, the challenging thing about her is she had the impulsivity of her mom, who was a working line Australian Shepherd. And she had the sturdiness and the boisterous attitude of the Molosser breed that was in her. And this was quite a challenge for me at that time. And this is how I started to deep dive into training and behaviorism and stuff like that. And yeah, it all started with her. She was a great hunter. Yeah.
That's amazing. So what, and I totally get that of your dog is your like your biggest teacher. I am convinced of that. And they
Yeah.
lead us down these paths. But in terms of predation substitute training, what does that look like? What does that mean for a dog and for the owner who wants to kind of go down that path themselves?
Yeah, predation is something that is a little bit, yeah, hard to catch for many people because when my clients come to me, what they normally mean when they say, "Oh, my dog has lots of prey drive," is they mean the dog is chasing, because chasing is the most obvious part for us. This is when it becomes messy and everybody, yeah, is getting panic attack because the dog is completely out of control, maybe gone because if he was off leash before or when he's still on a leash, screaming, lunging, barking, completely out of control. And but predation is a little bit more complex, and it's a behavior chain where the chase is only the middle part, and it starts way before the chase. It starts with orientation behavior. The dog is looking around, air scenting, sniffing the ground, listening. Is there something to hunt? And when they see, okay, there is something to hunt, then they go into a stalk. You might know this from a border collie or from a Weimaraner, from a yeah, or from a pointing dog in general. When they start to stare at this animal, and then they start to get closer to bridge the gap between themselves and the prey animal, because prey animals are swift and chasing costs a lot of energy, and then they go into the chase. And it also does not stop after the chase, because when the dog is, let's call it lucky, and is able to make prey, then what the dog does is he grab bites and kill bites the other animal, and then he starts to dissect and eat it. And only then predation has come to an end. So we see that it all started way before the chase and it goes on longer. And this is the whole thing that we're dealing with. So chasing is just one part of it. And yeah, you ask what predation substitute training is. Predation substitute training is a kind of training where you do not only look at one single aspect, like chasing or sniffing extensively or something like this, and start or try to stop it. It's more that you take into consideration, why does the dog show this behavior? What can we do to yeah, to teach the dog a functional alternative behavior, which means what can the dog do that still feels great and that still feels like hunting for him or her, but is not dangerous because the dog does it together with us.
Hmm. Yeah. So what would an example of an activity that you might do with a dog and in order to kind of create a substitute that would be fulfilling to the dog? What might that look like?
Yeah, so you always have to look at the individual dog. The first thing is we talk about the breed. When a dog comes to my training that is of a certain breed, I already have in my head some parts of the predatory motor pattern that this dog might enjoy. So maybe he's a big stalker when he is, yeah, a Weimaraner, just like I said in the beginning. Or when I have a beagle, I know that he might sniff out things extensively. Or for a spaniel, it's pretty much the same. They like to sniff, 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 sniff. A Labrador likes to grab and hold on to things or retrieve things. So we always look at the individual dog, and then we start building a training plan for this individual dog. And for example, it might be really simple. So for example, if you have a dog that loves to destroy and dissect stuff, so he cannot dissect a rabbit, even if he wants to, it's not nice to do, safe to do. So what we do is we take a treat, a paper bag with treats. So we fill a paper bag, fill it up with treats, hide it for the dog, throw it for the dog so the dog can sniff it out, can find it, can grab it, can rip it apart, and can eat. And this mimics the parts of the predatory behavior chain that are not safe to perform.
Yeah. I was just saying before we started recording that I kind of create my own versions for Lucky, who is a little Chihuahua mix. And one of his favorite things to do, he loves to sniff and find things. So he likes it when I hide treats in different places and I have him wait. We have like the cue of wait, and he gets really excited, like, oh, it's gonna come. And then I release him with okay, and he runs all around the yard or around the house or whatever, sniffing for treats in old socks that he has stolen because he's a major sock thief. But it's one of the best things that I have found in terms of fully engaging him on a physical, mental, emotional, and even energetic level. Because one of the things that I've talked about in previous episodes of the podcast is looking at the energy of the dog as well, and how they need to get that energy out into something, to ground that into something. And dogs tend to do that quite a bit through their mouths. So giving Lucky the opportunity to both kind of like pull at the sock with his mouth and also to dig at it, to get at it, really sort of completes a cycle, especially if we've had a difficult walk, for example, and he's been triggered on the walk and we come home and he's still kind of in that anxious state. Instead of exercising him more or kind of getting him to like exert more energy in that way, I try to ground his energy with allowing him, it sounds like kind of unknowingly, I'm doing a little bit of what you're talking about of completing the cycle for him, where he can kind of ground onto the socks, have that fun engagement, and then he's calm. He just goes and
Yeah.
does his own thing afterwards.
Exactly. And all the stuff that you now mentioned are parts of predation.
Mm.
Um, a lot of people don't realize that all the hobbies that our dogs have come from predatory behavior. It's all predation. It's what dogs enjoy. I always call it their biggest hobby. Their most favorite thing to do is predation in some way. It's not only chasing, it's digging, it's ripping stuff apart, searching for things, eating things that you have achieved, that you have made prey of, tugging. Everything comes from predatory behavior. And this shows us that it is so important for our dogs. And it's really a pity if we only try to suppress it or, keep it from our dogs.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, what I find really important to know is also that this predatory motor pattern, this kind of cycle that starts with orientation and ends with eating, is so important to lead to the end, because a lot of hormones and neurotransmitters are released during this process and they switch. This is very important to understand. The first parts of the predatory motor pattern are all about dopamine. Dopamine is something that feels really good for you when you're excited, but in a positive way, because you're figuring out something new or you are going on a new experience. It's all about experiencing something new. And and then as soon as the dog has made prey, there are other hormones that kick in. It's more endorphins and more happy hormones that enable you to enjoy things that you have. So it's rather, I wouldn't say necessarily calming, but it's more like indulging in something. So when you have a great meal together with friends and everybody is relaxed and happy, this is when endorphins are released. And this is what is happening towards the end of this pattern. So we have to make that switch from the dopamine, from the arousal further on to the cool down, to the calming part that is happening there. So we don't have a dog that is always wound up and excited, but also calm down in the end. It's like being in the gym and doing a cool down in the end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Because I've definitely noticed that, from a personal experience with Lucky, that if I'm not giving him those opportunities, the rest of the day is actually difficult with him. It's
All
not
right.
just, like immediately after the walk. It's that notion of trigger stacking as well, that there's both the build up that happens like before you go out from the walk, but then my experience, because he's little and he gets bothered by a lot of things out in the wild when we're
Yeah.
out on walks, that he brings that back. And if I'm not giving him appropriate outlets, the
Mm.
entire day just looks
Yeah.
difficult for him.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes clients have to experiment what is suitable for the dog. I just the other day had I think it was a galgo mix. Yeah. And she and he, it's both. They couldn't eat afterwards. After they came home from a walk, they were always super excited, running through the whole house, through the garden, couldn't rest. And then I told the owner, okay, what do you have at home? And she said, okay, I have a snuffle mat. Okay, let's fill up the snuffle mat with treats, with some kibble. But the dog was not, or both dogs were not able to eat these kibbles. So I said, okay, we have to build a little bit, make it a little bit easier for them. Because when chewing and biting is not possible anymore, maybe licking is still possible. Licking is easier for a dog. So what they did is they made a licking mat and a snuffle mat with treats, and then the dog started to lick. And from the licking, they came down one step further and they were able to eat from the snuffle mat. So we had to, yeah, we had to scaffold down the arousal towards being able to chew, being able to eat.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And what I love is that you're talking about really being present with your dog and really observing what your dog needs in that moment. And rather than applying kind of the standard 5-step protocol, here you go, and you fixed your dog, but
Yeah,
but actually look at, maybe it is about breaking up steps in a slightly smaller way that helps them make that bridge to eventually
yeah,
being able to calm themselves. That's amazing.
exactly. Yeah.
So how would you advise somebody who's kind of curious about the way that their dog engages with predation to sort of take that perspective and look at what are some markers that their dog is beginning to engage in that kind of behavior, and how can they support them to safely do it?
hmm Yeah, so you have to observe your dog. This is the first thing that you always have to do. Maybe you go on the internet first and research the breed. What does this breed, what was this breed selected for? Are they supposed to stay close to you, or in an original way? How did they work? Or are they supposed to work far away from you? Are they supposed to sniff out things, to watch things, to retrieve prey animals? So there's so many ways that dogs were meant to work for us and with us. And this is always the first step. You have to be aware of what your dog or your breed was made for. And if you have a mixed breed, yeah, maybe you can just guess and then look it up. And then you always have to reality check with your own dog, because not every dog has read the breed standard. And we have so many dogs in training that are completely, yeah, doing something they shouldn't do according to their breed standard. But yeah, the first step is always quite easy. Search the internet and then go out and observe your dog. What do they enjoy? What is their hobby? What brings them joy? And then you can start finding games, for example, that match those passions. So, for example, if you have a dog that loves to watch, that loves to, for example, a livestock guardian dog loves to sit around and watch. So let them do that. And if it's a part of this predatory chain that cannot be done safely, you have to find substitutions. The one that I just mentioned, for example, ripping apart stuff that you provide for them, or chasing, for example, a flirt pole or a ball or something like this.
Great. And so how would somebody start introducing some of those things to their dogs? I'm assuming like you're not going to want to try to introduce it while they're starting, hunting some livestock or, like as you're down next to the farmer's fields kind of thing. But how would somebody go about beginning to introduce those things to their dogs so that that becomes part of the release mechanism for them?
All right. So you always have to distinguish between real life situations
Mhm.
and yeah, free time. And during free time, which means you are out and about and you just feel like playing some games with your dog, then you play those predation substitute games with your dog. In the moment when you come across wildlife, this is something completely else. Maybe I will talk a little bit about the 4 parts of predation substitute training because this makes it more clear.
Yeah, please.
The first part is management and prevention. So we basically teach the dog to stay in contact with their guardians when they are out and about, because lots of dogs with high prey drive, when they are out and about, they are completely switched off. They are in their dog world and they don't really realize that their owner is back there at the other end of the leash. And yeah, so they are kind of disengaged. So this is the first thing that we teach the dogs, to stay in contact every now and then, because I want the dog to engage with the environment, but I also want them to be able to engage from time to time with their human, to realize that somebody is still there. And then the second part of predation substitute training are the games that we just mentioned, that you have to research your own dog and find what their hobby is, and then you give this to them regularly. And the third part is what happens when you come across wildlife, because then the games, yeah, they are nice, but they do not teach the dog what to actually do when a deer runs across the path or a rabbit starts to run off. So what then normally happens is that everything goes down the drain. The dog is completely switched off. The human is panicking, and everybody's feeling completely helpless and afterwards completely frustrated. The dog because he was not able to chase, and the owner because he was doing so much, and the dog still does chase. So we need something else for both to do, and we teach both the dog and the owner alternative behaviors that work in this situation. The easiest way to do that, or it sounds easy, but of course it's a lot of practice, is to teach the dog, instead of chasing with their feet, running, to chase with their eyes, which means that the dog is standing and watching the other animal, and then the dog can still experience all these nice dopamine emotions that arise during the chase with their eyes, but it's safe to do. And yeah, so this is basically what we teach owner and dog, so that everybody knows what to do in a situation when it comes. And then there is, of course, a fourth part, which is we also teach the dog a super strong recall, that when we have to interrupt, we can, because sometimes everything happens too fast, or the deer is very close and you cannot react. Your dog cannot, is already over threshold the moment it happens. So we need to get out of the situation, and this is what a recall is for. But in conventional protocols that I have looked into, the recall is always the biggest part. So when we talk about predation training, it's always about recall. And for me, the recall training is something very small in this whole training protocol. We need a recall, of course, but it's not so very important.
Right, right, because it's a holistic approach that you're
Yeah,
describing. And something
exactly.
that I think is useful to mention with this too is that, oftentimes when you look at sort of traditional training, positive reinforcement training practices, there's this idea that you're told as the owner that you need to be more interesting than the environment that you're putting your dog in. And quite frankly, I know that I'm not more interesting than the beach, than the park, I mean, there's no competition. And I think that that whole framing can be really frustrating and hard for the owner because you're in a no-win situation.
Yes.
There's no way you can be more interesting than the environment. So
Yeah.
it feels to me like what you're describing with predation substitute training is actually how do you use the environment in an appropriate way so the dog is still fully engaging with it, but just in a safer way.
Yeah. Oh, I hate this sentence so much.
Right?
It is, I was told this sentence together with, yeah, something even worse. I went to a positive trainer at that time when it was 25 years ago now with Malinka, and she said this to me, oh, you have to be more exciting than the environment. And I was like, thank you. How do I do that ever? And then she said, if you're not, then the bond between you and your dog is not good. And I was like, ooh. And I went home. I was crying in the car because I was told basically that my dog and I, we share no bond. And this is so unfair. This is so unfair because just because your dog goes over threshold when he sees a running deer says nothing about the bond that you have with your dog. This is total nonsense, and it's
Yeah.
so mean to tell this to people. It destroys you. And there is always this nagging little thought in your head, oh, my bond is not good with my dog. It can destroy so much. Yeah.
It's awful. You're right. It's so unfair. And I hear the same things with the kind of reactive behavior where people will
Yeah.
say to me like, you don't have control over your dog is such a bad dog, or whatever. And even though I'm pretty practiced at allowing that to kind of wash over me, it's still every now and again it gets to me and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I feel so terrible. And that doesn't help you as the owner to
No.
actually support your dog or to get out of the situation that you find yourself in, or to think about how do I positively move forward from this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we just have a quick look at the hormones that are released during the predation, it makes it totally clear for you that it has nothing to do with you and your bond because we have dopamine. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter that makes people become addicted to drugs, to gambling, to whatever might give you the next kick, the next win, the anticipation of something great. Today it could happen. This is what dopamine or what drives dopamine in your body. And then we have adrenaline, which lowers pain perception. So the dog goes out, and even if you have an e-collar or whatever on your dog, something aversive, your dog might not feel it because the pain is reduced in their body. And this makes total sense when we think about what the dog was bred to do. Some dogs were bred to face wild boars or stags or other really dangerous animals. And we know from dogs that are out in the field hunting with their human hunters, and they get really badly injured. Their intestines are ripped out of their body, and they still do not stop. And this is because the adrenaline, the dopamine, and so many other things in their bodies are still, yeah, working and high, and they do not feel the pain. They just want to go on. And then you are told to compete with this just with a cookie or with a toy or with your voice. For some dogs it helps, yeah, but for others, no, it doesn't help.
No, no. And my
Yeah.
little 10-pound Chihuahua can be like the size of a Great Dane with his force, like not wanting to
Yes.
move when he's like really engaged with something. And my little piece of turkey doesn't make a
No,
difference to him.
no, not at all. And to be honest, the small terrier types, they are the wildest. So it's not size, it's just determination. Yeah.
It's so true. It's so true. But I love too that you're bringing up the notion of understanding the kind of the chemical components and the genetic components of what
Yeah.
you're dealing with, because I think that's a big issue that we face with having dogs right now is that we bred them for particular purposes that would require particular behaviors, and now we
Yeah.
don't necessarily have those same needs for them, and we're putting them like in apartments, and we're going to work for 8 hours a day, and we're really tired when we come back from work, so we don't want to take them out on a really long walk or give them the opportunities to express their natural behaviors. And we know that when we don't allow ourselves to do what we need to do, the frustration builds. We know this with
Yes,
kids, right? You see like quote unquote bad behavior from kids when you're not giving them the kind of routines that they need, or allowing them to engage in the behaviors that are right for them, or we make them overtired or whatever. And
yeah,
so it's the same thing with our dogs. So the onus is on us to change
it's
the environment that we're putting them in.
yeah, it's really unfair that we have made them this way. Completely our fault, because our dogs are more determined than a wild canine. For example, a wolf, he only goes hunting when he feels hungry. So it's always the same. It's the same pattern. He wakes up, feels hungry, goes for a hunt, and then when he's not hungry anymore, he doesn't go hunt. There are these, maybe you know this from wildlife documentaries, when there is, for example, a lion on a water hole together with a giraffe, or together with a whatever animal, prey animal, and they can drink together because the lion is not hungry. But for us, for our dogs, it's not like that. Hunger does not drive predatory behavior in dogs. It's the dopamine, it's the kick, it's what we have bred into them, because we, 200 years ago, or even today, we felt like, okay, today I want to go hunt, so I want my dog to go hunt. So we need the dog to be ready whenever we want them. So they are basically ready all the time. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the really bad thing about suppressing this always is that it builds up frustration. You just mentioned this. And what happens when a high drive, high energy dog feels frustrated? They translate this in even more movement. When they feel, yeah, frustrated and held back, they follow their genetic makeup and they want to find prey even more, even stronger. So they go wider, they go harder, they sniff harder. And the more we try to hold them back and suppress the behavior, the more it builds up in them. And yeah, this is not a sometimes a very, yeah, frustrating thing that happens.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And like we've been saying, you might not see that build up, the kind of result of that build up on that specific walk, but you start to see it in other aspects, like that behavior, that need pops up at
Yeah.
different times in different ways. And that's often what we're referring to, what we would label as reactive behavior. It's
Mhm.
actually that frustration popping up in different ways.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it goes back to like the whole energy concept. Like the energy has to move. Energy is constantly
Yeah.
moving. And if we're not giving it an outlet, it boils up and it's got to go somewhere at some point.
Yeah, that's true. That's my observation too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel that when we think about humans as well as in dogs, we have more passive stress types and more active stress types. I am a passive stress type. This means if I have stress in my job or in my life, then I need to go home and sleep. But most high energy dogs or high prey drive dogs that I know are active stress types. So they have to get it out of their system. They have to run it out. They have to move. Yeah. So we have to cater this basic need first, and only then we can start training, because otherwise their head is everywhere, but not with us.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I wondered if you would be open to me asking you a few questions that
Of
some
course.
listeners
Yeah,
sent in. Okay.
sure.
Okay, so a question that the listeners had is, we value the wildness that dogs represent and allow us to see in ourselves. So they're great mirrors for that connection to the kind of wild nature of ourselves. They're a link to nature for us, but we don't necessarily know how to live like this. And this particular listener wants to know how you can best support and encourage the wildness of our dogs in the modern context.
Oh, this is a very important question. And I think it's so true, because we all have this picture of dog ownership in our head before we get the dog, or yeah, this dream. And I think for a lot of us, it involves being close to nature, being out and about with our dogs. And then reality kicks in and it's not so dreamy anymore. And here we really have to shift our perspective, because instead of, yeah, seeing this like, oh, he did it again, and this is so annoying. And yeah, let's start to admire what our dogs are capable of and the skills that they have. And it really, really helps to, I call it, to take interest into their world and to start. It can be so simple, just like figuring out stuff together. So, for example, when your dog is interested in a mouse hole, go over and have a look at that mouse hole and start to, oh, what have you got there? Is it something nice? Is it interesting? Even if your dog doesn't seem to listen, but by talking and being interested in it, your dog will gradually understand that you are actually a partner in this. And if it's safe to do, then let your dog do it, talk to your dog while he does it. And maybe you can even point out things in the environment that you come across and that you find interesting and that you might think your dog might be interested. For example, when I walk across a meadow, sometimes I come across the shed fur of sheep or of wild animals or some feathers. And then I show these to my dogs. I call them over and I use my recall cue. And then my dogs already know, oh, something nice is going to come. So I have sneaked in practicing my recall cue by showing them something nice. And then we figure it out together. So they like to put it into their mouth or scratch it or whatever. And sometimes they're completely not interested in it. And I'm like, okay, it was worth a try, but let's move on. So yeah, we try to stay in touch and figure out things together. And this might bring it a little bit closer, that this is actually a wonderful world that your dog lives in. And yeah, share it.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. And yeah, it's beautiful because I think we crave that connection so much. And our dogs become an excuse to, if we want to, like, to be able to engage that way and to look at the world. And, we often talk about training our dogs and teaching them commands or cues, but we often don't talk about talking to our dogs, talking
Mm.
with our dogs. And I do that with Lucky all the time. I just talk to him like he's a person. I'm not,
Yeah.
to be fair, I do use a bit of the baby voice, it's true, but he's so cute. And so he just elicits it. But I talk to him like, hey, what do you think about this? And I practice animal communication. And in that world, we talk about how the animal is sensing the intention and the meaning behind what it is that you're saying. So of course they recognize some of the words, but it's not so much that they're translating the words, but they're getting the feeling that you're sending to them about like, oh, I'm interested in this and I want to engage you and we're a team. Let's explore this as a team. And I think it's so beautiful for the bonding and for helping
Absolutely.
you to
Yeah,
connect back to the fact that we're not separate from nature, even though we seem to think we are.
exactly. Yeah. And I think it's beautiful. And I also use a lot of baby voice with my dogs and they enjoy it. I enjoy it. Why not? So if everybody enjoys it, what a... But I
Exactly.
also think even from a training perspective, it makes sense to talk to your dog because in a lot of training, you're taught not to talk too much to your dog, only give your cues or commands and then shut up. But in predation training, I deliberately talk to my dogs while they are engaging in a predatory activity. So when I, for example, let my dog sniff out a sausage tree where I have put some sausages in and let them search for it, or they are dissecting a paper bag, I talk to them while they do it because I want to stay engaged and I want them to yeah, to figure out that I'm still there, because when they can do this in a game, they can transfer it at some point into the real world. So I cannot expect my dog to listen to me when they are in a aroused state, because there is something to hunt around if we have never practiced this. And so I start talking to them always, and I tell them, okay, I'm still there, I'm with you, and if you listen to me, then you are maybe a little bit more successful than if you not listen to me. For example, when we do a sausage tree or we have hidden some treats, I do not point at the treats because I want them to use their nose, but I say, oh, have you looked over here or have you looked over there? And of course I know where the treats are, So my dog thinks, oh, she really knows stuff. It's worth listening to her.
Exactly. I do the
Yeah.
same thing even around the house where I mentioned
Mhm.
that I hide treats and socks and then hide them all around the house. And it's even gotten to the point that Lucky kind of relies on me. He just sort of gives up at a certain point. Like, I know she's going to tell me,
Mhm.
and I'll say, like, with the baby voice, it's always like, Bubba, I still see a treat. I still see a treat. And he's like, but what's your,
Wow.
yeah, I know. It's so he's like, oh, wow, she knows where they are. But he's also looking, which I think is amazing that dogs are able to do this. He's looking at where I'm looking, assuming like
Mhm.
I'm pointing to where it is. And so again,
Yeah,
it's a unit, it's a team, we're working
yeah,
together. And like you said, that
exactly.
then translates into the outside world of
Exactly.
I don't even have to say anything at this point where he does regular check-ins with me on the walk, whether he's on leash or off leash. He waits for me, he checks in, and he's really happy about it.
Yeah,
That's what we want, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love too that with some of the examples you gave of like the sausage tree and and things like that, that it's so playful and we forget like how important play is to us and to our dogs for learning and for enjoyment and for engaging with different ways of knowing. It's so important. And we just sort of think like, oh, that's just for kids or that's just for our dogs.
Oh,
But
yeah. Yeah,
you know, as adults, we need to be doing it.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, I've got another question for you from some
Okay.
listeners. And this is about taking a holistic approach. I've heard you speak about how behaviors like excessive paw licking or even skin conditions can be the result of suppressed prey drive or natural behaviors. I wonder if you could expand upon that.
Um, I would rather say it's it's a difficult question because you never know what came first. I don't know if you can say that in English, but in German say we don't know what came first, the hen or the egg.
Yep, the
Can
chicken
you
or
say
the
that in
egg.
English
Yep,
too?
yep.
Yeah, because for some dogs it's the other way around. They have a condition, maybe itching, maybe chronic pain or chronic discomfort, problems with their stomach, with their guts, and then they find relief in predatory behavior because it feels so good for them. It releases happy hormones, it releases pain suppressing chemicals in the body. So they do this to relieve themselves from this constant unpleasantness in their body. Can also be dogs with that have separation anxiety. For example, the human is gone for the whole day, um, comes home, lets out the dog, and the dog goes hunting because now the dog feels this relief. Oh, my human is back, and he has to get all this fear and stress out of the system. And then, of course, it can be also the opposite way that, yeah, for example, if you always suppress behavior and behavior cannot live out, it can result in physical problems as well. We know that from humans as well. But most of the time, I have to say that from my experience, it's the other way around. But it can be both.
It can
Yeah.
be both. Perfect. Thank you for that. Another one is, do you have any cases of dogs who've had extreme turnarounds in behavior or health after being switched to positive training methods?
I have dogs in my training who have come from aversive tools, and yeah, the question is a little bit, yeah. Let's put it like this: the people who come to my training here, to my one-to-one training, I have never had a dog who was really treated really badly in the past and then has come with the same owner. I have had dogs in the past where the owner has changed and now the new owner is doing it differently. And of course, you can see that in the dog. It's very obvious. So the dogs normally come in a very bad state from rescues from outside the country or from inside the country, and they are completely new dogs. But what is the cause of this change? It's not solely the training. It's also maybe the nutrition, the care that they get at home, the fact that they have a home now that they can um, sleep, that they can decompress because of all the stress that they had when they were in a shelter, for example. So I think it's a whole bunch. I wouldn't put it like, I don't feel comfortable putting like, oh, it's my training and now everybody's happy. So I think it's a more holistic thing why the dogs now thrive and
Right.
formerly have not. Yeah.
Completely. I agree. I think some of these questions are coming from people because we're often told, like, oh, positive reinforcement can't really help with a dog that has high prey drive. Like, you've got to use these aversive tools.
Yeah,
And I think people kind of instinctively feel bad using those aversive tools and feel like, well, there's got to be a better way. And I think they're pointing to this belief that it is possible to make change with positive reinforcement. And from what I'm hearing, you're saying absolutely that is the case.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
not a quick fix, but I don't think that your listeners expect quick fixes, something that you can do within one lesson or two. But I also have to say, sometimes we are really quick because once you start training with the dog and not against the dog realizes, oh, this is what she wants, then it's really fast. Also, we do not train for ages. Most dog owners come to me 4 times. So they buy 4 sessions, and in these 4 sessions, we can get really, really far. And then after half a year, maybe they book an add-on session. But I hardly have anybody in training who comes for 10 sessions or something like this. Because once you get the foot into the door and you start training with the dog, it goes really quickly.
that's amazing. That's so great. And I agree. I think it's about a relationship building and it's developing a way of communicating with your dog. And I've seen with Lucky, for example, where it will feel like, for me anyways, that it's taking ages to get somewhere. And then all of a sudden, it's like,
Mm.
boom, it's like he's
Boom.
plateaued for a
Yeah.
while and then boom, and it
Yes.
translates. That's the amazing thing that I've noticed is that it translates to other situations. He begins
Mhm.
generalizing in a way that makes everything so much easier.
Yes,
Thank,
exactly. And I think it's the same here. It's not that after those 4 sessions, everybody's fine and the dog does not chase anymore and stuff like that. But we gave the owners and the dogs all the tools that they need to go on by themselves, and then maybe after a couple of months revisit. And but they can go on training and improving. So the training itself never stops. On the
of
one hand, you
course.
don't need a lot of formal training, but the way of handling your dog and living with your dog and walking your dog, it changes, and then you have to hold it up for the rest of your dog's life, basically.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Well, what you're saying points to like a reframing around quote unquote fixing a problem and
Yeah.
actually building a relationship with your dog and knowing that both of you are constantly evolving and changing and the
Exactly.
situations that you're experiencing are evolving and changing and you're learning together. And
Yes.
I say all the time in the podcast ad nauseum that our dogs are our mirrors. So they're going to
Yeah.
flip something, something's going to occur in their lives that flips something back to us. And the two of us can grow together through that process.
Exactly, that's the point. And I sometimes or often get videos after 3 months, after 6 months, after 1 year, and people tell me, look at what was possible today, what we mastered. And it would have not been possible 6 weeks ago or 3 months ago because it's a constant evolving. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I love how you share on your Instagram various like success reels. And I saw one recently that I think the dog's name was Pepper, who
Yeah.
had struggled previously with prey drive and
Hmm.
in situ was just sitting there sniffing. I think it was a squirrel that he could see,
Hmm. Hmm.
at
Yes.
a bit of a distance, but like no budging, just really enjoying sitting there sniffing. I was like, that is phenomenal. It's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
cool to
Yeah.
see. So cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. I've got a couple more questions for
Okay,
you.
shoot.
Okay. So this one is there's a fine line between successful communication with our dogs and projecting our worries onto them. What is your favorite way of managing your own personal feelings or how you help the owner manage their personal feelings so that you can stay in tune with your dog rather than getting too into your own head?
Oh, this is very difficult. This is more like coaching the human than the dog. Um,
But
yeah,
that's a big part of dog training, I think. You know, it's a
exactly.
lot of working with the human.
Yeah, it is definitely a lot of work with the humans, and especially in predation training, we will always get into a situation where everything crumbles and falls down because we cannot control it. We cannot control the deer. We can.
Yeah.
There's so much going on in our environment that we have to take into consideration. Maybe our dog has a bad day. Maybe we had a bad day. Maybe the rabbit was too fast, too near, too close. So what I recommend is either in your head or really on paper, have a journal. And this simply is you take one piece of paper and you fold it in the middle. And on one side, you have the bad entries on your journal. And on the other side, you have the good entries on your journal. And you simply need to tick. And the direction should always be in favor of the good days. So that the bigger picture is what matters and not today or what happened on this single walk, because tomorrow it might be completely different. And as long as we have more entries on the good side than on the bad side, we're fine. It's fine.
Absolutely. Well, I think this kind of relates to ideas of cognitive bias as well, where we start to experience and see what we're expecting to. And so if we can
Exactly.
switch and actually focus on, okay, yeah, this stuff went wrong, but look at this one little thing that went really well, and just keep focusing on those little things. I've noticed for
Yes.
myself, I start to see more of that with Lucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
also,
even,
I
yeah,
no, go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just saying, you can also write down what around this particular behavior that you're training at the moment is improving. For example, if your dog still wants to chase the thrill, but maybe he's more attentive on walks, or he can now eat on walks, and formerly it was not possible. So if you write down all the things that have improved around it, also might put it into perspective.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of touching a little bit on this listener's question about the owner's responsibility in some of this too, from my own experience, I've noticed that when I kind of check my mental state and my energy state before we go on the walk is better. Because if I'm walking
Okay.
out the door scattered or already feeling anxious that something's going to happen on the walk, I guarantee you something will happen on that walk.
Yeah.
So again, like I think that's a useful thing, if that's helpful for listeners, that start with yourself before you even
Yes.
walk out the door. How are you feeling? And like I do stuff like I take a deep breath, and I just kind of like center myself. So I feel like I'm going out the door fully present rather than thinking about what I've got to do in an hour, or what I did yesterday and that I'm annoyed about, or any of that garbage that we're carrying that takes us out of the present moment, as well as
Exactly.
not anticipating bad stuff. I always anticipate this is going to be an amazing walk. And Lucky's going to handle these triggers. Like if we ever come across them, he's going to be amazing. And I've also taught him, which is something that's helped me. I mean, this works because he's small. If he feels overwhelmed, I've taught him to turn around and come to me, and I'll pick him up and walk him out of that situation. So I have that in the back of my mind too, that I've got the safeguard of he will come back to me, and I can just
Mm.
walk us out without there being a confrontation. So if there's something like that with your dog that's helpful, that makes you feel better about you being able to manage a situation, I think that's a really great thing to practice.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, and I've got a final question for you.
Okay.
And that is, what does it mean to be a good leader, teacher, or steward for your dog? And what can this look like practically?
Mm, I think you have to think about your dog's needs as a good dog guardian, leader, whatever. Um, you have to observe your dog. How is your dog feeling in this particular situation? Is the dog comfortable? Is he stressed or fearful or super excited? And yeah, I think this is the most important part, because we still have this pictures in our head of the pack leader, which is completely outdated. And I think it's something more like a relationship between parent and child, between dog and their guardian. Yeah. So
Definitely.
that you take the responsibility and do not put the responsibility on your dog.
Yeah, yeah.
This is so often heard when I hear the discussion about e-collars in the UK. There is this really ridiculous thinking that your dog can be or should be out in the field without you being present and still avoiding the cattle or the sheep. And I'm like, what is your dog doing alone in a field of sheep? And if this happens, if the dog really slipped your door, you are responsible. It's your fault. You cannot say, okay, I e-collar train my dog so that he stays away from sheep, and then I can do whatever I want. This is not how it should be or works. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It's like really passive parenting.
That's it. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Simona, this has been so helpful. And I'm wondering if there's any kind of final things you want to leave listeners with, if they're interested in working more with you and learning more about predation substitute training, where can they find out more information, all of that good
Mhm.
stuff?
Yeah, you already mentioned social media. I'm quite active on Instagram, also on Facebook, little bit on TikTok, but TikTok is not really my platform. You can find it when you type in Predation Substitute Training, or you can, of course, go to my website, predationsubstitutetraining.com. And if you want to know more about this type of training, I would recommend to start with the book. I have the book Hunting Together, which covers the 4 aspects of predation substitute training, gives you an insight into what we're doing. And yeah, you can get it from Amazon as an ebook, as a paperback. So it depends on your preferences or your what you are able to afford. And if you want to delve deeper, then I have some courses on my website. The most comprehensive course is called Call of the Chase, and it covers everything. Every tool that you and your dog will ever need is in this course. Yeah, you can find it on my website. But I think the book is a good start, gives you a solid basis of what to do.
Perfect. And I will leave links to all of this in the show notes so people can access directly from there.
Thank you.
Oh, of course, of course. And I wanted to ask you one final question that I ask all of my guests. And that is, what have dogs, either your personal dogs or the dogs you work with, taught you about what it means to be human?
Oh, wow, this is a question. So, what I especially love in my dogs is I'm not sure if this is about how to be human, but how to be a part of nature, and that we are not so much above nature and outside of it. Because when I'm out with my dogs, I always try to see the world through their eyes, even if I cannot really smell what they smell, but I think it's so interesting to see what they are interested in, and it's a completely different perspective. And I think this brings me closer to nature because I have to admit, I sometimes I'm also on my phone when I'm out and about, and then I remember, okay, to put the phone away and take interest into my dog's world. What are they doing? What are they experiencing at the moment? And yeah, I think this is really interesting.
That's beautiful. What a wonderful
Thank
answer.
you.
Thank you for that. Are there any final nuggets you want to leave our listeners with today?
Um, no, I think I'm good.
Perfect. Perfect. Simona, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been such a delight, and I know people are going to get so much out of it, and you just offer a really wonderful way to really allow our dogs to be dogs.
Hmm. Thank you,
Wonderful.
Alexia.
All
Thank
right.
you very much for the invitation. This was a very, very lovely talk.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Isn't Simona great? Are there any particular parts of your dog's predation sequence that you struggle with? What were your biggest takeaways that you'd like to try with your pup? I'd love to hear from you about other topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, or other guests you'd like me to chat with that would be helpful to how you're navigating this spiritual journey called life with your dog, feel free to DM me on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama. I respond to each and every message, and I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to learn more about Simone, her work, and her books, visit her website, predation-substitute-training.com, as well as her Instagram account, predation_substitute_training. I've left all this information in the show notes, along with affiliate links for her books. When you choose to purchase books through these links, the podcast receives a commission, which helps keep the podcast up and running. So if you'd like to pick up a copy of Simone's books, I'd be really grateful if you'd consider using these links. All right, until next time.